could you all stand to your feet and give a big startup grind welcome to Pearse Coyle, CEO of NVMdurance. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking.
I suppose the first thing, NVMdurance, I know it stands for Non-Volatile Memory Endurance, but could you explain that in layman's terms?
Yes. So we operate primarily in what's called flash memory. So flash memory is what's classed as non-volatile memory. And just very briefly, most computer memory, like when you turn on a computer and it's operating and your computer is processing data, the memory that it's interacting with is volatile. So when you switch off the computer, the information in it is gone. Historically, the only computer storage that has been non-volatile has been magnetic media, hard disks. But there's a big change over the last 10 years whereby there's memory that is non-volatile, primarily flash memory, which is hugely faster than hard disks. It's much sort of closer to the processor in terms of accessibility, and crucially, when you turn off the computer, it doesn't go off, or it doesn't lose the data. So that's what non-volatile memory is. But the sort of dark secret of the industry, as it were, is that it's not really non-volatile, and it doesn't really last forever. It actually wears out. After a certain number of reads and writes, you just can't use flash memory anymore. And that's a problem that sort of dogs the industry, and that's what we solve. We're non-volatile memory endurance. We make it last longer. So that's what we do. So
is flash memory what the likes of Apple devices use instead of hard disks?
So flash memory is all over the place. By usage, I think the biggest, but equally the biggest categories are in what are called solid-state disks. So solid-state disks are the successor to hard disks. So things like your iPad, all the new laptops, certainly all the small laptops have solid-state disks as opposed to hard disks. So that's the major use category. The other big category is in mobile phones. In smartphones, when you go and take your pictures and all that stuff and switch them off, the information is stored in flash memory. Tablets, and then memory sticks, cameras, all that kind of thing. It's all flash memory, and there are a couple of different forms of non-volatile memory, but flash is by far the dominant.
Okay, and where did the whole idea for NVMdurance start, and how did that sort of develop? Because I know it's quite a while ago that the original genesis of the company formed.
So it has its roots in analog devices locally. So Joe Sullivan, the original, the sort of half the original inventing duo, worked in analog devices. And Joe was tasked with figuring out how to make NOR flash memory last longer. So NOR flash memory is a sort of a related technology. And Joe did a bunch of work and discovered this a basic concept that if you vary the operating parameters of a piece of memory in the course of its life, so instead of using the same voltage levels and various other things from the beginning of life to the end of life, if you vary them in the course of life, you get a big extension in life of the product. And Joe left analog devices, went to work in Limerick Institute of Technology, and Joe wrote a paper on the subject. And subsequently, various people in the NAND flash, NAND flash is the predominant form. Various people in the NAND flash industry came across Joe's paper and said, well, look, this looks interesting. I wonder would that same concept apply to NAND flash? And Joe did some consulting work, determined fairly quickly that yes, it would apply, but also determined fairly quickly that the process of determining what ought to be the optimum parameters is too difficult to do manually. It's something that needs software to figure out what are the optimum parameters. And so Joe teamed up with Conor Ryan in University of Limerick, and the two guys basically doggedly over about 10 years tried all kinds of different approaches to solving the problem, and basically got better and better at it. And then a few years ago, which is when I became involved, they went out looking for funding for it, and and the rest is history. I mean, I'll tell you more of the detail later on, but that's how it came about.
So it's sort of a software solution to a hardware problem?
Yes.
Okay, I can get my head around that.
There you go. We are a software company actually, so that's
Tell me a bit more about Joe and Conor then.
Yeah, so it's all going. That's recorded, and I have several colleagues, and Joe and Conor couldn't be here tonight for various reasons, but they sent along a couple of plants for it to come back.
Keep you honest.
That's it, yeah. So Joe and Conor are great guys in a couple of key respects. So the two guys, so first of all, they're very clever guys, and the basic invention behind what we do is very good and very solid. And they have, in the course of that 10 years, they weren't exactly locked away in the lab. Like, they spent a fair bit of time actually out there engaged with industry, and they also, there was a related product that they tried to commercialize themselves before, to do with test equipment for flash memory. So the two guys are fairly pragmatic and unique, well, not unique, but certainly differentiating them from the vast majority of university-based principal investigators. They're very commercial, and so the really key thing that the two guys have always got, nominally I've come in as the sort of CEO who's got a commercial background, and so nominally I would be like the sales manager, and in a lot of other ventures connected with colleges or spin-outs that come from colleges, you have this terrible situation where the PIs just say, well, you're the sales guy, off you go, I'll stay back here in the lab. The two guys totally get it, that they need to do the world tour stuff and show up and basically establish their own credibility and establish the credibility of what we're doing. So they're totally involved in the sales process, and that's been really key. And and we've a very the company's worked really well because of that. We're all shared objective, and
So from an investor point of view, they're happy with the team.
Yeah, they are. They are. I mean, the investors, we had a long run in with each of our investors, and they spent a lot of time, I suppose, grilling the guys, and also asking some of our potential customers what they thought. And one of the central things that we're very strong on is the quality of the team, not just the two guys, but we've actually quite a deep team in Limerick now. And some have travelled from far away to join us in Limerick. Actually, my colleague Amit is there somewhere. So Amit came all the way from India. So we've actually attracted subject matter experts from around the world to join the team, and we, and then there's homegrown people as well, including our Amit, who's one of our star, relatively younger people. So we have a very deep team, and in flash memory, like if you actually analyse the industry, there's a relatively small number of players at the heart of it. And there's relatively small numbers of people who understand flash memory very deeply, and we have about half a dozen of them here in Limerick, and that's pretty exciting for us. So the kind of, for all our customer engagements and so on, that's been a really key feature.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges facing academic or corporate spin-outs into the commercial world?
How long have you got?
We have an hour.
Yeah, so Pat knows that I spent about 4 or 5 years prior to NVMdurance specifically trying to, I had a venture that was specifically oriented towards getting things out of companies. And I ended up focusing on college-related things subsequently, but there's a lot of commonality between the two. And so the challenges are various, and one of them I've alluded to already, and that's the So first of all, the attraction. I mean, the attraction of company spin-outs or college spin-outs is typically that there's a big piece of research. There's something already developed, and you're trying to actually get it out into a company. So possibly sometimes can be millions spent on something. Millions that a startup would never get access to. To do sort of primary research before the thing comes out. So that's the real attraction. But there's two major impediments to them coming out. One is this issue that the key people are unprepared to sell, and yet they're absolutely crucial to the sell. When you're trying to get early adopters, it's all about yes, I have a genuine world-class invention here, and the only person who can do justice to a world-class invention is the inventor, to a large extent.
Yeah.
The likes of me and various people can set up all sorts of stuff, but you've got to be prepared to go and get on the plane and so on. So that's one big impediment, particularly dogging academic startups. The other one then is a kind of more subtle one, which similarly dogs both types of startup, and that is that the principal investigators will often be in their, at least late 20s, very often well into their 30s or 40s, and they're very settled. They have, families, mortgages. They're somewhat institutionalized, but crucially they have a decent salary, pension scheme, and so on, and all the comforts of that. And you say to them, hey, look, I'm some shyster now who's going to help you make a few bob out of this. And tell you, all you have to do is give up the job, and walk away from all that stuff. Jeopardize your tenured academic post, and who wouldn't want to do that? So it's a killer. The risk thing is a killer. Now there's stuff that can be done about buying out teaching hours, and some creative approaches being taken to it. But that risk thing is a huge impediment. And then finally, for corporate finance, there's another impediment, which is that whilst you may have some very big company and there may be some completely non-core piece of invention in there that would totally look like it ought to be spun out, and that you may have validated the market for it commercially. You say, yes, this could function as a separate venture. But the parent company, has no incentive to cooperate with that. In fact, they have a significant disincentive, because if it's successful, it won't make much difference to their balance sheet. It's going to be relatively small. If it's too successful, it's embarrassing because it looks like they got it out. Or if there's some other problem or IP leakage or something, there's a reputational risk. So the executives, and something like a corporate spin-out would be a corporate action. It has to go right up to the board. And trying to make the case to the people that this minuscule thing, which stands to profit some of your employees, is of benefit to you to allow it to go out. It rarely happens. So it's quite challenging.
Anyone care to ask a question at this stage? No? Okay. So you've got a great technology, but your market is at the other side of the world. How do you get it over there? That's one of your key challenges, isn't it? Well,
so I thought about that. I knew this question was coming, and I thought about it, and it's relatively easy, to be honest, and it's. So the starting point is you've got to have a world-class technology. So there's no point in getting on a plane or even starting a company in a space like this if it isn't world-class. If you don't genuinely have something that's sort of 10x, something like significantly better than what's out there. And then if you do, so you got to have that. And if you do, then so there's a supply chain in every industry, and you've got to figure out where you fit in. Like, what's your position in the value chain? And in something like storage is a great business to sell. And I've worked in storage before. There's a couple of my former storage colleagues in the audience there to keep me honest as well. So I've past and present. I can tell no lies here at all. But storage is a great business because it is very technical. It's a technical sell. There's a bunch of layers to it. Like there's people, making for example, in disk drives, there's a small number of companies that make disk drives, and downstream there's a set of companies that make disk arrays and various things like that. And then there's a few other points in the value chain. So if you've got an original technology that fits into, I'm back. So if you've got original technology that is fundamental, then you go and find who are the players in the market. And in our case, there's about 15. And so you basically go after them, and it is a radical pitch. Like what we do is fairly significant.
And was the key benefit of Tom Bernice the fact that he understood the technology, or he knew investors that would get it?
We're in a very particular niche, very very specific niche, flash memory, and there's a relatively small number of investors that play in that space. So I was friendly with one of the investors, and I knew that they had an investment in a company in a related field. So ahead of them deciding to invest in us, and this is an American venture capital company, so well ahead of them deciding to invest in us, I approached them and said, look, you've invested in this other company. Who advised you on that deal? Who was able to help you qualify the opportunity for that? And so the investor connected us with Tom Bernice. So then we began working with Tom Bernice. At that stage, we were funded by the NDRC, the National Digital Research Centre in Dublin. And so NDRC put some of their funding towards some consulting with Tom Bernice. So Tom basically helped us develop the proposition. He understood the market. He understood how best to present it. And then it's the sort of Rolodex thing, as the Americans would say. He knew who to call, and so we got in pretty quickly. Now, I mean, it could have taken us forever. Maybe we would never have got in without Tom. So Tom was able to basically wheel us right in. We got very strong feedback very early on from the really big guys, which was to the extent of, we don't believe you can do what you claim you do, but if you can do it, yes, we do want to do business with you. And that's all we needed at that stage. And then we got some better traction. A couple of people signed up for paid trials quite early on, and then we went back to that investor and said, okay, your guy can corroborate that there is a market for this. So basically the whole funding thing was done for us, so he corroborated the investor, yeah, this looks really good. The investor came in, it actually took us out of the NDRC early, and they invested. And they've invested in us twice since. So
that was a smart trick.
Yeah, it worked quite well actually. Yeah.
For those who didn't have that trick up their sleeve, sometimes you hear people say a VC in the Valley won't invest in a company unless they can reach the boardroom in their own car, sort of thing, sort of local.
Yeah.
How relevant is that? True?
It's incredibly true. And in fact, it's funny. It's incredibly true, and I listen to a lot of podcasts with startups and things. And there's a guy, Jason Calacanis, who's a big noise, and he was based in LA. He moved to Valley lately, and he was always moaning about that. And I used to find that amazing. But I was in LA a couple of months ago. There's another company in our space, and we're quite well connected in the Valley. I spend a lot of time in the Valley now, and he was in LA moaning about how hard it was to get started because they weren't based in the Valley. And I'm thinking, like, here we are in Limerick, and this guy in LA is moaning to me about how he can't get at California-based VC. So it's amazing. So it's only partly true though. So it's completely true if you are not a Me Too, but if you're kind of a generic software startup and you are going to be, if you've got one of these pitches that says like I'm the next Uber or the next Airbnb or something like that, you've got to be based in the Valley. You won't, like, those guys just won't take it seriously if it's not a car drive to where you're going, and that's completely rational on their part. It's to do with time management. That's the way they work. But if you are, and a lot of Irish ventures will be, particularly stuff coming out of colleges, you'll be in some particular obscure niche. So you've got a polymer that is going to enable XYZ, some obscure thing like that. Then when you go looking for capital, you don't want the generic Silicon Valley VC. The Irish VCs can give you money, which is great, but they won't because they don't know your space. But if you go off and look at who are the other companies in your space around the world and who has invested in them, no matter where they are, you'll find that when you rock up to them, they'll be delighted to see you because either the principals are from the polymer industry or whatever it is, or else in order to make that first investment, they've spent a heap of time understanding that industry. And you're as a VC, it's pretty challenging actually to be an investor. And one of the big rate limiting steps is understanding the space. And if you already understand a particular space, you're thinking, I can leverage what I already know, and B, I can use that other company to help me qualify this one, or there might be some sort of clustering effect, or maybe they can help each other. So no matter where you are in the world, if you're in a specialised niche, and to be honest, most of the stuff coming out of Ireland, if you're not like really deep in a niche, it's quite hard to make a splash internationally. You just go finding out who has invested in your space, and it doesn't matter where they are.
Makes sense. It's often said that VCs don't bring as much to the table as people sometimes say. That the investment is the main thing, and VCs often say, we bring lots of networking and expertise and all that. Do you think that's overstated?
Far be it from me to impugn the people who are helping us to meet the monthly payroll. So, comments like that are easy said, the far side of funding. But I can tell you, when you haven't got funding, you want money, and the Irish VCs, for the most part, are general purpose. They can't afford to be too specialised. There aren't enough hours in the day for them to look at all the stuff. So consequently, for most things, if you're deep in a niche, it is just money. But I mean, beyond that, though, I wouldn't knock it. So actually, getting through the process of getting funding is very hard, and you have to do a lot of things that you need to do anyway in order to get it. And what any VC worth their salt at least can do is help you a lot around governance, structure, just management stuff. But yes, for the most part, except for specialist investors like the ones I was describing previously, for the most part, yes, you wouldn't want to think we're getting a couple of million from an investor now and they're going to help me with all these fabulous connections and so on.
Excellent. Liam, your question?
So having an advisor kind of played out very well for you. if you're recommending a startup to get advisor, what kind of like equity agreement would it be, or what's kind of typical procedure to have in place? Was there equity with just a large bag of cash handed over? What was the incentive of the advisor?
It's a good question, and it's one that it's a really good question, and and allocation of equity really early on is something that people get into terrible trouble with, because people can be very flahulak with their equity when they think that 100% of nothing is worth nothing kind of thing. There is a good rule of thumb or approach for a lot of equity related stuff currently, which is that most people defer the question as to serious granting of equity until some sort of serious funding round. Now, in that case, in our case, we were lucky that the NDRC was like an investor, so they actually paid the guy, so that was simple. But for other people, you'll often find that a lot of the time the people are fairly senior and have made money elsewhere. So the paltry amount of money you could pay them from your own resource if you didn't have an investor is of no interest to them. They also understand, if they're anyway decent, that an entrepreneur who comes along and offers them 20% for a bunch of advice is just not a good idea. They say, no, look, don't worry about that. Don't be trying to do that. Give me an option to invest in your first round, maybe at a discount to everybody else. So that's one of the common things. An option to invest at a discount to the price everyone else will pay, or a future promise of some sort of equity deal. But it's of that nature with the external advisors, because they know that if they were devious, they could talk you into all sorts of ludicrous deals. But if they're a bit more savvy, they'll know that that's pointless, and that your next advisor will say, I can't believe you gave that guy 20%. So it's blurry.
Question, Liam. Shane.
What problems are recurring in dealing with investors, and how would you overcome them? Because you had your first business, you were positive, and you exited that. I'm guessing you took investment into that and the same this time around, and you seem to be going well.
It goes back to the glib statement I made earlier on about how do you get access to people in Asia and America. You sort of start up by having a fabulous product. It's kind of most investor problems are a symptom of your proposition not being sufficiently compelling. The biggest thing, the best thing you can do, and like everything flows from having a world-class product that has a great market. And the position you want to get yourself into is one where you have your choice of investors, because investors themselves don't like to feel like they're the only ones who are backing your company. Say, well, who else is in? So there's a huge element of that. And secondly, you've got to have some sort of an auction going on where you can try and play one off against the other. You could agonize forever about tactics to do with investors and so on, but it comes down to that. It comes down to having a situation where they must come on board. Everything else is secondary, and and we are the far side of a recent funding round at the moment, and that was hellish actually to close that. It was really hard. It's always really hard. Like, it's incredibly tedious, and we had. We had a number of parties were all set to fund us, and then corporate investors who pulled out at different reasons. There were by the time we closed the round, there was a different set of people than at the beginning of the round, and there was different rows between possible investors about terms relative to one another. So it's terribly inefficient, and it's shocking that when you're, in theory, you should be out there, managing the company, selling the stuff, whatever it is. You spend like 50 or 60% of your time on fundraising, and even when you have all the parties agreeable to come on board, that actually so you say, okay, so we're a great venture, that's fine, it's really good, and the parties say, okay, we're going to come on board. Actually, between that and having the money in the bank, it's an incredible amount of work. So I can't, what's the word? I don't mean to sugarcoat it. It's crap, actually. But I mean, we're the right side of it right now, and for reasons I won't bore you with, I'm actually not fundraising at the moment, which is fabulous. I'm actually able to do what needs to be done, so that's good.
Thanks for that. Can you talk us through your funding journey as a company?
Liam has a question there though, if you want to take.
Sorry, Liam.
What's your view there, particularly when we're trying to look at companies that would scale?
Well, the friends, family, and fools one. Let me take that one first of all. So VCs in Enterprise Ireland are professional investors. They're paid a salary by their employer. They go into the day job. Day job is to figure out, am I going to invest in this stuff? And they do or they don't, and they're clinical about it, and they know the risks, and it's not their money. Your Uncle Jimmy, who made a few bob on the buildings, at your cousin's confirmation, you persuade him that this thing is really going to be the rocket ship, and he says, sure, how much are you looking for? And he gives you 20 grand or whatever it is. When your business has failed, he's still your uncle, and there's going to be another family due, and they don't get it. The family don't get it that it's a punt, it's a, so you just, and that's family. I mean, that's family. Then other angel investors who are not in your space, like the people who might have made money from something else and they happen to just invest. There are horror stories. I mean, a friend of mine had one of his business didn't work out, unfortunately, and one of his angel investors used to sit in his car in your man's driveway, sort of stalking him, kind of saying, when am I going to get my money back, kind of thing, So it's creepy, and not to be recommended. It may seem attractive, but there's also an element of there's a delusional thing. Your family might think you're great and have trust you too much and give you the money, and whereas the professional investor will tell you why they shouldn't give you the money, and they might put things right. So avoid that one. Then on the thing about equity giving away, they need to get over themselves. It's well established. In each round, you're going to give away sort of 15-20%, whatever it is, and you're going to learn so much from the interaction with the investors, and you're typically going to accelerate your progress so much more that it's well worth doing. If you try and scrimp and save and make your money last, you're going to miss the opportunity. If you have ready access to cash, if you're able to trade, bootstrap, all that sort of stuff, then sure, go for it. But very few can. And sorry, my last provider on this plan, this was a point in favour of not taking the money. If when you play the thing forward, it's obviously just going to be a lifestyle business anyway, then there's no point in taking equity money. You should try and trade into cash flow positive. So it's not clear cut, but so that's my complicated view on the subject.
Okay. So Joe and Connor had developed the product over many years. When you came on board, what did you bring to the table? Was it the sales experience, connections?
Yeah. So what do I do? That's what I do. Remind me.
Or to put it another way, what's the role of the CEO here?
Well, so I mean, we're I would say we were a three-legged stool as a company. We've good funders. I run the sort of commercial side of the company, and the guys run the technical side of the company. And all three elements of that are crucial. My approach to things is so what I brought to the party is, I suppose, a bit of process around sales. We are in a market. Who are we chasing after? What do we need to do to close people down? We are we've had a bunch of false dawns. One of the big flash, really early on, when we were still in the NDRC, one of the big flash manufacturers basically signed up to pay us 30 grand to do a trial. And one could easily have said, we're home and dry, this is it now, this is the mothership, there's only 6 flash manufacturers, this is one of them, we're right in the heart of it. But before we got too far with the trial, they cancelled the trial because they had just bought a company in our space for about $300 and something million. And the same thing happened with our second trial, the same thing happened with our third trial. And our fourth one had troubles as well. So only that we were sufficiently confident of what we were doing, and we had a broad enough sales pipeline. We survived all of those things, and we've been persistent. So I suppose sorry, I'm leading the commercial thing, but also kind of holding the thing together in terms of keeping the funders on side, keeping them well informed as to what's going on. I mean, the funders could pull the plug. Like we're a venture funded thing, absolutely. And we probably will be for quite a while. And go back to your guys who don't want to give away 20%. I mean, there's ventures that have the potential to trade profitably, but they could go a bit more slowly, do a bit of professional services, and get some money in. But if you're like us and you have something that stands to be an enormously valuable proposition, you've got to throw money at the problem of actually getting to market quickly. You don't do service to your opportunity if you don't get cash in and go as fast as you can. And that's the classic VC thing. The vast majority of companies won't survive the test of are you a VC company or not. We are. So I suppose I'm like a, what's the word, conductor of an orchestra, this kind of thing.
Okay, and what do you think are the qualities that make for an effective CEO?
I don't know what the sort of business books say about that, but I have two. I've worked in a bunch of companies at this stage in tech, and there's two people actually stand out for me, and two of my former colleagues will probably concur on this. Two guys were John Mabry and Chris Horn. They were actually classmates in college. So John Mabry was the boss in Eurologic, and John was like steady guy, understood totally what's going on, very well liked within the company, didn't interfere. There was a very strong management team. The management team got on with what they were supposed to do. It was kind of like you'd struggle to say, what does John actually do? It was that kind of sort of lack of micromanagement going on, and very well liked and like very credible in front of customers. So that was one. And then Chris Horn in Iona Technologies, really well liked. Again, knew everyone in the company, knew what was going on. Very good in front of customers and so on. So they're my role models actually. Kind of, almost do nothing, or what you actually do is like you're just enabling other people to do stuff. Don't get in the way, but at the same time make sure everything's happening. So like we have a really strong team in NVMdurance. Like it's not it's all about getting the orchestra to play really well together, and that's what's worked really well for us.
Great. So do you see NVM sort of growing market share by acquiring other technology, or are you sort of ripe for acquisition?
Well, it's funny. We've had a bunch of companies come along and talk to us and say, we'd consider buying you quite early, and the first one or two times we'd kind of get excited and go into a huddle and, God, how much would that be worth, and all this kind of stuff. But for the most part, it just doesn't happen. And textbook, we would look like an acquisition play company that ought to be acquired, but you cannot influence the timing of that really. And there's a lot of the most likely acquirers are going through a downturn in our industry at the moment, which is a very temporary thing to do with oversupply in the flash memory business. The kind of macro market trends are fabulously good in terms of market growth. Excuse me. So we are kind of a one-trick pony at the moment. We make the endurance of flash memory last longer. But to implement our technology, there are a number of related technologies which we would be better placed if we owned some of those. And there are acquisition opportunities for us. There are companies of varying size that would have what would be kind of relatively commodity pieces of intellectual property, which would leverage our really unique piece of technology. So our intention is to carry on trading independently, build a technology suite around what we've got, and thereby sort of increase the average value of each sale that we do. The day that one of us sits up and says, well, we're all set now, we're all set for acquisition, we're just waiting, that's the day we go bust, So.
How have you found being based in Limerick? You mentioned that you got a number of people from around the world to come here. Has getting the right talent been difficult? Have you considered moving?
So Limerick is good. Limerick is a very good tech city. There's a lot of good technology around Limerick. A byproduct, a very good byproduct of having an academic origin from the principals of the company, is the recruitment. It's a combination of spotting the really bright people early and encouraging them to come to your company. It's also about directing research so that there's people who are doing PhDs and masters in your area. So that's worked really well for us. And similarly in Iona Technologies, like the founders were all my ex-lecturers, and it was like being back in college. Everyone was in. So it was like all the bright people from college, apart from me, were in the company. So regardless of Limerick per se, being in the city where the two academic founders are based is enormously beneficial. Then, from a sample size of one, we have attracted at least one gentleman who's come all the way from India because he was a subject matter expert in our area and sought us out, and we have had approaches from other people. So Limerick works really well for us. There is also so Limerick's worked well for us. We are under pressure to expand in other areas, but the expansion is going to be. We will need to expand in Silicon Valley. We will need to expand possibly in Taiwan and China and places where
you have a presence in San Jose at the moment, do you?
Well, we do. I mean, Tom Bernice is based in San Jose, and I spend a lot of time there. But I interviewed a guy there last week. So our early customers are in around San Jose. That's where the sort of memory industry is centered in Silicon Valley. And the companies that are implementing our technology would be happier if we had sort of local technical people who were holding their hands as they get going. So we will probably after our next round of funding, we will do a bunch of recruitment there.
What do you think Limerick startups could benefit from the Limerick technology sort of ecosystem? How could Limerick leverage? Is there a USP there we should be looking at for startups compared to Cork or Dublin or Galway?
I think sectorally, I think Limerick should bet in a few sectors. I certainly think flash memory, the one that we're in, there's definitely potential to have a bunch more flash memory related things in Limerick. I think Limerick benefits hugely from Shannon Airport. We have American visitors coming here, and they get here quite easily. And that's something that's I think only Dublin would beat in terms of connection. So that's very good. Otherwise, then I think the likes of this and good quality, incubator accommodation, that sort of stuff is good. I mean, it's hard to do too much of the really smart stuff. The really smart stuff comes down to the individual entrepreneur and the sector they're in. But the support stuff around this kind of peer-based, how you get non-lads, this stuff is really useful. And then, lobbying for. What would be fabulous if Limerick Inc. could do it is get a West Coast flight out of Shannon. That'd be really good. Now that would, if you could have, ideally San Francisco or even San Jose Airport. If you get a West Coast flight out of Shannon, that would set Limerick way apart from anywhere. You'd come closer to Dublin in terms of attractiveness. You'd also, in terms of FDI, would do really well out of that as well.
Great. Any more questions? Peter.
Just wondering, Pearse, to what extent does the multinational tech sector or companies that are here play a support role, or can they assist with the likes of Intel and people like that? The fact that they're here, just in terms of adding credibility, or actually tangibly helping companies like themselves? It's
not very direct, and there's actually an IDA networking event coming up that I was invited to, and over the years I've looked at this. Various people have had the idea that, golly, are there a whole bunch of Irish companies trying to sell to Intel? Maybe we should get them into Leak-Slip or wherever and do that sort of thing. So the direct connection absolutely doesn't work, and it's almost counterproductive. You show up in Apple in Cork trying to sell something, and there's nobody. Well, sorry, I don't know the Apple infrastructure really well, but in general, so forget I said Apple, but in general, with the big operations of multinationals in Ireland, they're there for a job. They're there to take a product that was designed elsewhere and make it in volume for a certain market or whatever. Sometimes there are parts of R&D in Ireland, granted, but so in general, as a way of selling into companies, it's next to impossible in Ireland. Where it does help, though, is in a couple of things. One is recruitment. So you've got guys who are working in, wafer fabrication, whatever, and they know that area, and it's in the way that like we have like Joe and Barry Fitzgerald in our company are both ex-analog, and that background has been really key. So recruitment and the AMCS guys, they're all, and a bunch of them, they're ex-analog as well. So recruitment and creating a feedstock of people who've worked in world-class operations, that's really useful. And the other thing that's really useful is it usually helps the credibility of Irish companies generally. The fact that you're selling, and they know that half the world, they know that half the companies have a big presence in Ireland, so it's credible. Like if you came from, I don't know, better not say impugn some country, but if you came from wherever the hell and nobody can think of any tech that was ever done there, then that would be damaging. So overall we absolutely benefit from the big tech presence in Ireland of multinationals.
Would I be right in saying that some, if not all, of your management team and directors are male? And it seems quite common in like this space. What can you see that can be done to maybe improve gender diversity and why do you think it exists?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and so we hired a senior lady recently, actually, Jeannie Fitzgerald, who's a PhD, and so that's great. And I don't mean to sort of rest all my hopes on Jeannie to change our gender balance. So this is a subject I'm very interested in because I have 3 children, and the only one of my children that's interested in tech is my daughter. And I run in the primary school she goes to, I actually run a tech thing, like a Coder Dojo thing. We set it up in the school, and it's a primary school. It's a mixed primary school, and it's 50-50 participation, pretty much boys and girls in the school. And somewhere between primary school and you're filling out your CEO form in college, the wheels fall off. I think that is where the problem is, because you can't fault companies for the gender balance when there are no applicants. When that reflects the applicants. You can't fault graduate recruiters when, still 80% of engineering classes are men. So it's somewhere between, I don't know, primary school and secondary school, or primary school and the end of secondary school. I don't know. I don't understand it. It's amazing because I see what's happening in primary school. So that's all I know. And sorry, and I think I said this to Pat or somebody the other day. So I'm in Silicon Valley about a week a month, and the only time I meet a woman is a marketing person or marketing person. I go through weeks and I wouldn't meet a single one in business meetings.
So it's not just peculiar to Ireland.
No.
Can I go in, Pat, for a second there? Just in relation to, again, looking at, and I think you're right, Pearse, right? So that gap between what happens is my eldest daughter is leaving primary school, right? Currently interested in tech, and I'm looking at what's going to happen at the other end. I think that some of the things that are happening nationally, regionally, for example, the Young Innovators event, some of you would have been participating or been part of that. Very positive in terms of getting the schools engaged. We have the SciFest tomorrow, in the regional SciFest taking place in LIT. And again, the purpose of that is to try and engage all kids to think tech and to think opportunities and careers in the science and technology space. And that gig that was done jointly by companies in the region and UL, LIT, Mary I, Limerick for Engineering. So getting kids to think careers, and I think that for the 30 companies that were involved in that, right now there's 229 jobs, vacancies available, engineering jobs in those 30 companies in the region. And within a number of years, that's going to be 1,000 plus. So we need kids to look at tech and engineering as careers. There are opportunities there. So that's some of the things that are happening, but we do need to do it.
Good point. What could Ireland be doing better for startups to help the startup ecosystem?
So I am a huge fan of the Enterprise Ireland policies and the sort of jobs innovation policies thing in recent years, and this is a long answer to your question, but this concept of the action plan for jobs, and there's about 40 or 50 different things on it, and which ones are working, which ones aren't. The answer to your question, truthfully, is I don't know, but trying lots of stuff is a great idea. and and like for the most part, people will say government needs to get out of the way. But at the same time, in Ireland generally, what we're doing around supporting companies is really good. And I know various Americans and other nationalities that I'm dealing with are amazed, like the availability of funding and so on. So that sort of stuff is really good. So some of the macro stuff, stuff around the legality of share options and tax things around that, matching the UK in terms of the attractiveness of tech investment, more stuff around cool incubator places, more stuff on if they need to throw money at flights in a couple of places, so those kind of macro market things are really good, and that idea of just trying stuff and being self-critical, and Enterprise Ireland are fairly good about asking what do you think about stuff. So just trying new stuff, because it's like what works today doesn't work tomorrow, and in startups as well. Like you've got to if you're in a startup, you've got to keep tuned into startup news, what's going on, because stuff keeps changing. So just being nimble actually is the best thing the state can do, and understand what it can do well, and stuff about funding, accommodation, tax, infrastructure, lights and broadband, that sort of stuff.
Brilliant. Great answer. Just finally, what if you were to give an early stage startup 3 tips from your vast experience, what would they be?
Don't overplay my vast experience, number 1. I'll repeat something I said a couple of times, and it's increasingly fundamental to startups are increasingly about the product. It is becoming easier and easier to get a world-class product out there, or to do justice to it through virality and whatnot. So find a place where you can lead the world. That's the number 1 thing. Define your niche until you find that actually you're absolutely standalone. Just keep refining until you say, okay, well actually, I have figured out that I have the absolutely best way to separate this product or this material from this material, whatever it is. Just keep going until you find you're absolutely in a world-class place, and then everything follows from that to an extent. So that that'll be number 1. I don't know. Number 2, so much flows from that, and also be very critical about what it is you're trying to do. And what I mean is, don't get wedded to an idea and say, right, I'm going to fundraise for this, and the first funder said no, the second funder said no, and maybe say to yourself, is this a good use of my time? Consider you're the primary investor, so whatever you're going to do, sell it yourself really well first, and don't waste your time on something. Try to have some way of testing your idea. Figure out some way of testing your idea which allows you to have confidence and say, actually, this isn't some harebrained scheme. I mean, with my vast experience, I would claim to be able to, given a particular idea, I would say, oh, that looks fantastic, But actually, very few great ideas survive engagement with the market, So try and have some way of testing your idea. You've got the idea, you've thought it through on paper. Try and find somebody you can actually test it with, who would be somebody who might be spending money on it. So try and find a world-class idea, market test it, and be honest with yourself. Don't just make sure you utterly believe it before you try and get anyone else to. So that's
great answers. Does anyone else have any questions?
Pearse, you said that one of the people involved in the industry paid for a trial that you guys actually proposed to pay 30k for the trial. I think that's something else Irish startups fall into, that they quickly go for to do free work, or another company asks them to do a trial and they don't actually ask for money back.
Yeah.
It's always, from my experience, if someone's willing to pay for something, it's going to have a lot more than they pay. So that's kind of what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I mean, it isn't that simple. I mean, I certainly would place no value on a completely free trial. Now, actually, with some of our trials, we actually had to back down on some of the price, because we were advised by our people on the client side that, look, to get this signed off, I've got to get this guy to do it, and he actually thinks your stuff is crap. So, if you want to keep going. So we made a call on some of those, and actually backed away from charging. In general, though, it's a really good rule of thumb because you test a whole bunch of things. Are they serious? Does it survive management level assessment of your thing? Because normally to write a check for $1, a company that sign off at a certain level. So you actually get you get past some of those things, and crucially, it's a way of convincing your investors as well. Because if you're at the stage where you're still, you're pre-revenue and you're trying to keep your investors on side, and there might be a long sales cycle thing even beyond the trial, the notion that somebody is prepared to pay a chunky amount is validation of your proposition. So you really should try and charge.
Anybody else? Okay, well look, I know I personally found your insights absolutely fabulous, and I'm sure the audience felt the same. So let's give a big round of applause. Cheers.